Welcome to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Building Supply. I'm your host, Don Magruder. If you like today's show, go to aroundthehouse.tv where you can sign up for our YouTube channel and our weekly newsletter. Well, winter's coming and your plants will know it soon enough. Today we have an expert when it comes to your plant and lawn. Teresa Watkins from She Consultants can be here, and she's going to give us tips on how to survive the winter. So with that, I'd like to introduce Teresa Watkins from She Consultant, and I'm so happy to have you here. You are the foremost expert, in my view, on Florida-friendly plants and how to survive a winter. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Don. I appreciate it.
Teresa, tell us a little bit about yourself and She Consultant.
Well, She Consultant stands for Sustainable Horticultural Environments, and it is a company, a landscape design company that I have, and a consulting company on landscapes.
Teresa, if someone had a question about today's show, which I know they're going to, how can you be contacted?
They can write to my website, which is www.she-consulting.com.
Now, I know a lot of our friends from Wisconsin and Minnesota laugh at us when we talk about Central Florida winters, but we do have winters.
We do have winters, and what I love about Central Florida is we get a change of seasons, and we do see cold weather, and even occasionally, every 10 years or so, snow.
But it's not uncommon to have frost and a few hours of freezing weather that can wreak havoc on your plants.
Every year. It'll get down below 30 every year.
Does it seem that the temperature and weather is getting a little more extreme? We're either real hot, real cold. It seems like we're losing less fall and spring. Am I wrong in that?
I don't know. I think it's because we've been around a long time and we can tell what happened 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I think that it just depends. I do know that our water situation, we don't have as many wetlands as we used to have, and that can add where we get colder in the wintertime.
Thinking about what homeowners do here in Central Florida regarding their lawns and landscaping, what is the biggest mistake people are making when it comes to putting plants and shrubs and those things in their yard?
There's two things.
Okay.
One is either under-fertilizing or over-fertilizing. So they're not reading the labels, they're not doing it at all, and that doesn't give the plants the nutrition it needs in our sandy soils. The second thing is either underwatering or overwatering, and it's not usually underwatering. I think people in Lake County water a little too much.
Really?
We're the highest water user in the St. Johns River Water Management Districts in the counties, in their district.
Well, I know from my own yard, if I overwater the yard, it seems that the weeds thrive the most and the fungus and those type of things happen.
It is exactly right. You get a fungus when you have all the three conditions. You have the pathogen, which is the fungi, and then you have the water, overwatering, humidity, and the temperatures, warm temperatures.
Well, Teresa, I've known you for a few years, and I do consider you one of the probably the biggest experts in Central Florida and Florida friendly. You understand where I struggled in my yard, and because of your advice, I've figured this out, is picking the right plants for your yard, for your soil, and for your location. And there's zones and stuff. Can you sort of talk about the process people should consider in zones and soil and those type of things and picking the right plants and shrubs?
Yes, that's a really important part, because if you don't start off with the right plants, you're never going to be successful, and your yard is always going to look to be very, very sensitive, and it gets weedy then, and it doesn't look good. So you want to select the right sunlight conditions. Now, you may have several in your yard, your front yard versus your backyard, whether you have trees or no trees. So you want to either find out if you have full sun, which is 8 hours a day, The partial sunlight is either morning sun, afternoon shade, afternoon sun, and that's 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day. And then we have full shade, which is usually between the houses on zero lot lines, between 1207 and 1210, and you don't get any sunlight at all, or only about 5 hours or less of sunlight. That's considered full shade.
Shouldn't you also consider the homeowner's appetite for putting time in greenery? For example, I'll be honest with you, I'm more of a set it and forget it type guy.
Sure.
And there's some people who like to change out their plants and stuff.
Sure. You should always have good plants that are the backbone of your landscape, and those are the evergreen plants, and some may be occasionally, flowering plants too as well. but you want to have a lot of perennials and ornamental shrubs to be the bones of your landscape. And then depending on your budget and how much you want to work or change out, then you add annuals to the landscape.
For here in Central Florida, the perennials and annuals and ornamental plants, what are some of your favorites in those categories?
Some of my favorites to use are flowering trees, and one is St. Luke's plum, which has burgundy leaves all year round.
Really?
Burgundy leaves all year round.
Does it get big?
20 feet tall. It's kind of about the size of a dogwood or a crepe myrtle.
Okay.
And it has little flowers in the springtime, little pink ones, no fruit. Then I also like the crepe myrtles. Crepe myrtles are a wonderful plant. And one of my favorites right now is the black diamond crepe myrtle, which again has burgundy foliage, and they have wonderful colors.
A lot of people do crepe murders on their crepe myrtles, don't they?
This is the time of the year I start to get real edgy and try and tell people do not commit crepe murder on your plants. If you're taking, crepe myrtles come in sizes between 6 foot and 40 feet tall. If you're making a 40-foot tall crepe myrtle by your front door, a 6-foot tall crepe myrtle, you have the wrong plant in the wrong place.
See, I never knew that until you told me last time. You actually can buy dwarf crepe myrtles.
You could even buy crepe myrtles right now that are shrub crepe myrtles. They can make a nice, lovely hedge.
Wow.
And I'm trialing 2 of them right now for proven winners.
Well, you brought us some things to look at, and first off, I think I know what that is. What do we have here, Teresa?
That is a gardenia, a new one that's on the market. It's from Southern Living, and it is called Scent Amazing. And just the flowers alone look beautiful on it.
I love that.
But it grows all year round, and especially in the wintertime, it does nicely, and in spring.
Are they fairly hardy?
These are all these plants are hardy. They
Now,
will
what
go
about
through the winter.
fungus? Are they resistant to
Well,
fungus?
again, you have fungus when you have conditions in your landscape that sometimes we can't control, which is our rainy season in the summertime. But then also, too, when we're overwatering or spraying water over our plants. So fungus conditions is usually related to maintenance.
How big would this one grow?
This one's only going to get to be about 3 foot tall.
So it's basically a dwarf.
Well, gardenias can get to be 10 to 12 feet tall, so it's not a dwarf, but it's just a smaller shrub.
Boy, it's a
Perfect for underneath the
beautiful
window.
smell.
Yes.
What do we have behind there, Teresa?
This is the Canna, and it's a Canna Lily, and it's called a Tropicana.
We have those in our yard.
I love them.
I love them.
And they take tropical conditions, which we have during the summertime. But in the wintertime, if we get a major freeze, you just cut it back down to the ground, and it comes back every year.
Well, see, that's one thing. We have them around the house, and we had a freeze a couple of years ago, and they looked awful. And I thought I was going to have to dig them up. And when I talked to you, you said, no, Don, don't dig them up. You said cut them off at the stalk.
Right, cut them right down to the ground, and they will they are a type of bulb.
So I want to ask you this about winter. You say we have a hard freeze this year, and you lose some plants. Mm-hmm. When do you cut the dead off? And because I was told if you cut it too early, you might promote growing that would.
That's not hardened off, and so so I usually wait until the end of January, mid-February before I cut anything back. Our last freeze of the year usually happens by March 15th. So if you wait until the middle of February, end of February, and cut it back, which you should also cut back your ornamental grasses and things at the same time, then it's not going to emerge quickly so that another freeze will hurt it.
That's a beautiful plant there.
It is gorgeous, isn't it?
Now, what do we have here? This is beautiful green. I love the color.
This is one of my favorites to plant in the landscape because it only gets to be about 3 feet tall.
Okay.
It's great around a pool, and it too is winter hardy and blooms all year round.
Now, what is this called?
This is a Heliconia, and don't be fooled by the pot because this says it's an annual. Because we sell a lot of our Florida plants up north, this would be considered an annual around Niagara Falls.
Oh, really?
Okay, they just throw them away every year. But here in Florida, we can grow them year-round, and they're not affected by the winter.
So if it gets to 30 degrees or 28 degrees, will this plant die?
It depends on how wet it is and if we get some frost with it. If it's just real quick freeze, no, it's not going to be damaged.
Another winter issue, I've heard opposing things. If we have a freeze, some people say, turn your sprinklers on and coat your bushes with ice, and they'll survive.
No, we used to have citrus growers that would do that, and that would keep the orange at that set temperature of 32 degrees, and the citrus would be protected. We don't have that need in our landscapes. The water bill will be terribly high, and it doesn't protect your plants, not your tropicals like it would a citrus tree.
And how often should you water plants like these?
Only when necessary. So once it's established, and when establishment can take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months, once it's established, rainfall is great for all of these plants.
That's a beautiful plant.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Now I like this little white plant here. This is pretty.
Isn't that pretty?
That's pretty.
This is from my yard. This is a white candles with Whitfieldia elongata.
Okay.
And try and say that 3 times real quick.
I won't try.
But it's called white candles, and it looks like a candelabra. It gets to be about 5 to 6 feet tall. But what I love about it is that it blooms in the shade. So all of this plant in my yard is blooming in the shade. Look at how gorgeous that would be.
Now, is this hardy during the winter?
It blooms all winter long.
So you mean you can have white flowers in the winter?
White flowers in
and
the winter.
And how does it react to freezes?
It reacts fine because it's protected by the canopy of the trees. So if we get a really severe frost, if it gets down to like 20, 25 degrees, it'll be cut back, but it'll come back every year.
That's a beautiful plant.
Isn't it gorgeous?
And I love this plant back here. What do we have here, Teresa?
This is a traditional honeysuckle. It does beautifully here, blooms all year round, a little bit more in the springtime and summer, but all year round, and is just wonderful for butterflies and hummingbirds.
And is this hardy during the winter also?
Hardy during the winter, because this goes all the way up to zone 6.
We're getting towards the end of the program, but I need to ask about palm trees.
Palm trees, queen palms and Phoenix robelinis don't like the cold. Okay, so if you're wanting a great palm tree for your yard, our state tree, which is a cabbage palm, is perfect. It grows all the way up to North Carolina. Then there's also the Bismarck palms and the Pindo palms, which are a color of blue. And I like that with palm trees, a different shade of blue. But then you also have your Washingtonians and your rapis palm trees that do well too.
I know in my yard, I've lost all the robelinis.
Yeah. They don't like the cold temperatures.
Yeah.
So, what I say is if you really love, to have a Phoenix robelini, or if you want a queen palm, buy cheap ones.
Let me ask you another question. What's the best way of covering plants if there's a possible frost coming?
Best way to cover plants is to wrap the warm air around the plants to keep the plant warm. You don't want to lay sheets on it. You don't want to lay plastic on it so that it's touching the leaves. If you want, you can go to the box stores and you can get a frost blanket, which is sort of like the material you make collars out of. It allows the sunlight to get through. It allows moisture to get through, and it can stay on for a week. So buy some frost blankets now before you have a freeze, because when they announce a freeze that night, they're sold out.
Teresa Watkins from She Consultant, thank you for being here today. One more time, if someone had a question about today's show, how can you be reached?
Well, I have a free monthly gardening newsletter, and they can sign up for that and see my podcast at www.she-consulting.com.
Thank you for watching Around the House today, and be sure to go to aroundthehouse.tv to sign up for our YouTube channel and our weekly newsletter. Until next time, we will see you around the house.